Everyone wants to know how much it costs to build a house in Nashville or Franklin, but what I see all the time is people starting with one number in mind and ending somewhere else, not realizing there are a lot more pieces to the puzzle than they expected. And the tricky part is, it usually doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small decisions along the way that don't seem like a big deal at the time, until you see the full number come together. Hi, I'm Heather. I'm a realtor here in the Nashville area, and I work for Elevate by Dries Homes, and I help people build custom or semi-custom homes on their own land, and I've even built my own Dries home, so I've been on both sides of the process. And if you're thinking about building, make sure to like and subscribe. I break this down in a really practical way so you know what to expect before you get too far into it. So, let's start here. There is no one number when it comes to building a home because your cost depends on the land, the location, the builder, the floor plan, and your selections. But I can show you how the numbers build and where people tend to get surprised. And just to be clear, this doesn't mean you have to spend a certain amount of money in order to build. This is just about understanding where the numbers come from so you can plan it the right way. Because most of the time, it's just not that obvious at the beginning. So let's talk about the base build, but I want to clarify something first. When people ask about price per square foot, which is a common question, that can actually vary depending on what you're including. Like, are we talking about just the house? Or are you talking about the entire scope of the project, of the property with the land, the site work, and everything, all the upgrades and everything included? And that's where a lot of the confusion starts. So to keep it simple, for us at Dries Homes, most of our floor plans fall around that 180 to about 200 per square foot range when you're building on your own land here in Tennessee. But that's just for the home itself. And typically those one-level homes are going to be closer to that higher end price per square foot range just based on how they're built with extra roof trusses. But this is all just a starting point, right? That price per square foot is a great baseline for the home, but then you're going to start adding some upgrades, and it's going to vary depending on exactly what you add to it and exactly what comes with it for that entire build. So that's where that gap usually starts to form. Next is the land, and this is going to be one of the biggest variables in your total cost. You might be looking at a smaller lot in a community or a larger acreage somewhere or something more private and custom or something on a higher end of town. And that price can vary a lot depending on the location, how close you are to Nashville and Franklin, how much privacy you want, and what's available at the time. And this is where I start to see plans shift pretty quickly. I've had conversations where someone had a certain overall budget in mind, but they were also looking at one of our larger floor plans and wanted it to be in a higher end area like Brentwood or Franklin. And when you start looking at that specific combination, it can be a little challenging. You've got that higher starting price for the home and higher starting price for the land, and that can easily take you way over budget if you have a certain amount in mind and it's just not jiving. But it's not always that the plan doesn't work. It just means we have to step back, take a look at the full picture, and decide what matters most. Is it the location, is it the size, or the overall budget? And we'll try to get the best that we can out of all of that. But that's a typical crossroads in the process. Then you have site costs, and this is one of the biggest areas people underestimate. This includes things like clearing the land, grading, utilities, septic if needed, extra long driveway, and here's the part most people don't expect. I've seen site costs range anywhere from like $20,000 to $50,000 on the low end to $100,000 or sometimes even $200,000 on the high side depending on the land. And that's because every piece of land is different. Some are ready to go and some need a little bit more work to get them build ready. So 2 lots can start out at the same price but end up with very different cost. And I've actually have a full video breaking this down into detail because this can change your entire budget. And this is usually one of the biggest surprises in the process. And this is also where I see one more thing happen that's really important to call out. A lot of people are mentally budgeting for the house and maybe the land, but they're not fully accounting for everything it takes to actually get the home completed and move-in ready. And that can include things like the driveway extensions, landscaping, outdoor spaces, sometimes additional utility work depending on the property. And again, none of these feel huge individually, but when you start to stack them on top of the site cost, that's where that total can start creeping up more than expected. And this is one of those areas that's just not that obvious at the beginning. Then we get into structural upgrades and design, and this is where things really start to come together. First, you're making structural decisions. These are going to be things like the bigger changes that affect the layout of your home, like adding extra bedrooms, adding a media room, expanding spaces, maybe doing a second story porch or doing a porch extension, choosing different fireplace options. There are so many decisions, and these will be things that shape how your home lives day to day. Then you move into design, and this is the fun part. This is where you're choosing things like cabinet colors, countertops, quartz or granite, tile flooring, lighting, paint colors, and seeing all the new fun stuff. This is where you're really making the home feel like yours, and you're creating something you're going to get excited to walk into every single day. And a lot of the times, this is where inspiration comes in. You might see something on Pinterest or in a model home or at the parade of homes or on TikTok or Instagram, and you're thinking, ooh, I like that. I want to do something like that. But then you start figuring out how to bring that vision to life. And that's where you start balancing what you love, what matters most, and what fits into your budget. Not to say you can't do it all, because sometimes you just can. But something else I want to help you with is to really understand just how many decisions you're going in there to make. It's not like you're just making one or two decisions. You're making decisions for every area throughout the house, and it's a very much layered decision process. It's not only just the layout, but structural changes, your finishes, your design selections, and just the overall finished vibe of the home. Each one impacts your overall budget in some way, and by the time you're in it, it can start to feel like a lot. Even when I built my own home, I remember getting to a certain point where I had to step back and kind of clear my head and think what really mattered most, not just what looked good in the moment. And having that clarity makes a big difference when you're trying to stay on track with your budget. Now, let me show you how this all adds up. Let's say you start with a base build of the home around $500,000 to $600,000. Then you want to add in the land, maybe $300,000 to $400,000. Then site costs somewhere around $50,000, maybe $100,000. And then design center, structural upgrades, probably another $50,000 to $100,000 potentially in each category. And now suddenly you're over $1 million. Now, when you take a step back and look at everything together, you're in a completely different range than where you started. And part of that also comes down to the location, right? Land is going to vary per area. So that price per square foot is definitely going to mean a lot depending on just the home or the land together, right? So like something in Brentwood or Franklin is going to land something very differently than something in like Lebanon or Mount Juliet, for example, even if the home itself is similar. And that's why it's so important to look at the full picture. So what should you actually do with all this information? 1, start with your full budget, not just the build, everything, land, site cost, upgrades, the full picture. Number 2, understand land and site early, because those can shift your numbers the fastest, and location plays a big role. This is where people get surprised. Number 3, leave room for upgrades, because you're going to want to personalize your home. You're going to see fun and pretty things that you want, and that's part of the process. And number 4, ask what's included. Don't assume, just ask up front. Just because you see it in a home does not mean it comes with the home. It's important to understand standard items versus upgrades. And number 5, get guidance early, because it's a lot easier to adjust early than later, and it really helps to have someone walk you through the process. This is the difference between feeling confident in your decisions and feeling overwhelmed halfway through. So, if you haven't watched my video on the biggest mistake people make when choosing a floor plan, go watch that next, because these two really go hand in hand. And if you're thinking about building in the Nashville area or Middle Tennessee, I want to help you understand what your numbers might look like, and I'd be happy to walk you through that process. And Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this. I'll be breaking down every step of the building process. And in the meantime, thanks for watching.